Hello and welcome to Steven University. This week we are discussing the last single episode before we hit the bomb. It is called 3 Gems and a Baby. Chris, what's it about?
3 Gems and a Baby, Dan, is a flashback episode. So
yes,
Greg is staying with...
Did you get before you explain? I've got to ask the question now because you just hit it. Did you sense it was going to be a flashback episode from the title, or did you turn it on and within a minute figure it out, or did you had that guess before?
No, I'd have guessed that before because unless it was about a new baby appearing, of which there are none on the horizon, and the gems reacting to that baby.
You could have created. You could have given one of the townies a baby, or said that Vidalia had another kid. I suppose. Although, God,
you could have done, but even then, the most interesting story is for that baby to make the gems reflect on how they were with baby Steven. So,
true. Yep, there you go. Okay.
I think, for me, I was expecting a flashback episode.
Okay, carry on.
So the gang, it's snowing really badly, so Greg's staying with the gang because of problems with his van not being heated. Seemingly, Greg's forgotten that he's a millionaire and could get the van fixed, could get a house, could stay at a hotel. There's lots of options for Greg.
I'll be honest with you on that point, and I think that it was an excuse for him to spend the time with Steven.
Yeah, definitely.
But you're right.
We find out
he could have done anything.
We find out Steven's 14 years old, which is quite interesting. I didn't. To my knowledge, he hadn't been specifically aged.
They have done it in the past, but he's gone up since then. Like I think the earliest references to his age, he turned 12. I think in the episode Steven's birthday. I think,
right.
And then the idea is a year or two have passed since then, basically.
I'm looking forward to season 6 dealing with puberty. The
gem version of puberty is probably going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it does make me think either the show will run for a much longer time or it will get to 16, 17 and stop. So Greg starts referencing when Steven was young. So Steven's like, whoa, you know what this means? So he's like, I've got a song for this. So he starts singing and we flash back to him struggling, staying with Onion's mum and stepdad. Although they don't appear to be about. One of my favourite moments, or at least one of the most emotional moments, is during that song. He's holding Steven and he looks at a picture of their happy, united family, where there's it's a 2.4 children kind of setup, and obviously there's only 2 of them, and Rose isn't about, so he looks upset. The gems then appear and give Steven inappropriate gifts. Can I also say that Amethyst holds her cardboard box way too close for that heater for my liking? I thought that was a health and safety risk.
Who's the health and safety person on this production? You could have hurt the actor. Come on, guys.
Garnet gets him a razor because at one point he'll need it in the aforementioned season 6 puberty years. Amethyst gets him diapers, but they're old people diapers. And angry missing Rose Pearl gets him... I can't remember what she gets him now. Something else wildly inappropriate. It is a dictionary. Which obviously he doesn't need yet. Then Steven's gem is like glowing and doing stuff, so they think it might be Rose trying to transform. Rose keeps saying it's not. Garnet keeps saying no, it's not shape-shifting. It's fusion, which I thought was interesting because I'm sure Dan will correct me, but I hadn't really heard of Steven being referred to as fusion before. It makes sense.
The point of the episode, though, is that they've all got it wrong.
Yes, yeah. But I'd still. So maybe that's why we hadn't heard of it before. But I still thought it was like that was a real kind of like, oh, what does that mean? Why did they think that kind of thing?
It's interesting. It's interesting that they all had their own ideas about what Steven was, because obviously Steven's the first of his kind. No gem has ever mated with a human before. So it's like. I like this notion that the gems were just like clueless as to what he was. What are you? Are you a shapeshifted version of Rose? Makes sense. Amethyst would think that. Are you a fusion of Rose and some of Greg's sort of human baby? Therefore, you could theoretically defuse.
Makes
some
sense
point.
For Garnet to think that.
Makes sense for Garnet to think that, and for Pearl to just think that Rose is still in there. and it is literally is Rose, it makes sense too. So I didn't read too much into the idea that it's fusion, because my impression of it is that none of them know what they're dealing with, so they're just making wild guesses.
That makes sense.
And I love that they've got such. The cast is so well designed; they're able to make really appropriate choices about what each one thinks that make real good sense, like in the context of the show. So yeah, but sorry to interrupt your recap, Chris, but yeah, I just thought
No.
I thought that was we had a perfect in to hit on that point, and I think I think that's quite powerful and really well done. We'll talk about it in more detail later, obviously, but
yeah. So that's we're gonna talk about it in more detail later, Dan. Why'd you interrupt my recap with it? But so I think you got to decide now.
Good point, Chris.
Do we talk about it now, or do we not, Dan?
Well, we kind of touched, but we'll talk about stuff around it. I don't know, Chris. We're just making this up as we go. Stop acting like we're a professional show with a pattern and a strategy and a structure to this conversation.
I just feel like my recap's been interrupted more than usual, and I'm finding it difficult. So then,
are you saying that you can't work under these conditions?
Of course you've got a comment. That's I tried to get us back on track. I said so then, and interrupting me again.
You said so then. I know. Wait a second. No. Like a man fishing, you put a maggot on the end of your hook. You threw it into the water, and then went so then, and started to pull it out. I was like, no. You knew full well that your comments about my involvement in your introduction would cause me to respond, and then you said so then, knowing I would take that bait. Feel like you've done that on purpose, Chris.
Well, I wouldn't be that calculated. So the gem's still Stephen, and then they take him in the van, and Greg's upset. So Greg starts following them while they discuss these ideas about what he is, whether he's shape-shifting, fusion, etc. And they kind of stop. Garnet unfuses, which is a really cool moment because Stephen's freaked out by this. Where did kind of Big Garnet go? So they then fuse back, and they talk about how they can't handle this. Greg's been chasing the van, and then you think Nick's a sled and a dog to kind of form some sort of Santa-esque sleigh thing, but he hasn't. He's just getting chased by the dog, which is quite funny. I love the notion that it's freezing cold and it's awful weather, but Greg is still that fatherly instinct of still chasing the van and doing all he can. Greg gets back in the van, and then they realise that it's best to do it together. That's the best way to learn and take care of Stephen. Mm-hmm. Flashback to the future, and Stephen saying that they were wrong to think they couldn't do it, because clearly they could, and now they're all together in a scenario that Rose, he reckons, would have loved. That's the end of my recap. Let the discussion commence. Feel free to chime in, Dan. What were your thoughts?
I think the character of Chris in this episode is being far too tetchy. So to as revenge, I happen to have access to a bag of your favourite crisps, Chris, which I believe are Disco's salt and vinegar flavour.
No, they're not. I like Disco's. I don't think they're my favourite crisps, and I don't particularly love salt and vinegar.
Oh, what? I was going to eat them loudly to wind you up, but I'm not going to do that now, because one, it would make a horrible noise on the mic, and two, they're not actually your favourite crisps. I thought they were. What are your favourite crisps?
No pretense. I don't know, I like Frisps. I like cheese and onion Walker's Max.
Dear Lord.
I like cheese balls / cheese puffs, as discussed on the Shorts episode. Mini cheddars, I like.
Yeah, we've talked about those on the pod on Nothing But Static. Okay, fair enough. I'm disappointed now, because I really thought it was just coincidence. I looked over and I saw that I had those floating around. I was like, I'm going to really wind Chris up now. What perfect time.
Well, you know why you think that? It's because often our route walking around where you live would include going past a Poundland. And I would occasionally pop in and get Discos, because it's one of the few places you can buy Discos.
Is that what it is? Do you go for the salt and vinegar ones, generally speaking, or what? This is not relevant
in a bag of In a bag of discos, yes, because I don't like prawn cocktail much either. So therefore, salt and vinegar is the second. I mean, cheese and
What's
onion,
the first?
ideally.
Oh, it's cheese and onion.
And,
Oh
and
God.
then salt and vinegar.
Yeah, you're never
'Cause
gonna get
that's
me. You're never gonna get me eating cheese and onion over salt and vinegar, Chris. That's lunacy.
Well, they don't have. It's really not a great bag for people, I don't think, because they don't do it. It's not like ready salted salt and vinegar and cheese and onion. It's prawn cocktail, cheese and onion, and salt and vinegar, which are three very distinctive flavors. So I don't think there's anyone out there that likes all the packets of discos in a discos multi bag.
I would eat. It's salt and vinegar's number one. Prawn cocktail's number two. I think cheese and onion's three for me on that one. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. People, comment below if you have discos.
Well, the thing is, I don't think they have discos in the States, nor do they have flavors with the flavors we have. We have flavors over here that they think are lunacy. Like prawn cocktail sounds, I imagine, like insanity to them, as does cheese and onion. So yeah, I think salt and vinegar might be a thing in the States, though. I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Anywho, let's.
But the episode.
Let's talk about the episode, Chris.
What did you think of that?
Well, now I'm free to talk because, of course, apparently there's been some sort of rule about interjection since the beginning that I wasn't aware of.
I made it very clear you could chat.
Yeah. Well, I'll chat now since I've got the chance.
You got the chance, yeah. I'm giving you permission.
First, my first thought of this episode is that I love it. It's a great episode. It's a really, really nice episode. It's got a weirdly Christmassy vibe to it. It aired on the 1st of December, so it wasn't that close to Christmas, but close enough. There's a bunch of weird religious references in this episode, which we'll get to. Like the shot of them all in the van, the three gems gathered around Greg holding Stephen while wearing a blue robe like Mary. Like, bit much.
Yeah, I noticed the three gems bringing gifts, like the three wise men. But I hadn't noticed that last one. No.
Yeah, well, if I was to send you that screenshot now and you were to look at it, you would be amazed. You'd be like, well, "How did I miss this?" Because Greg is even positioned with his wing mirror over his head like some sort of weird halo.
Oh wow!
It's quite overt. I wonder if I can send you the image.
No, I can. No, I'm picturing it in my mind. I don't need to see it. You're right. Yeah.
It's something else, and of course, Rose being sort of reborn as Stephen. Like, there's a whole, I don't know, there's a whole religion thing in there. Which I'll be honest with you, on a personal perspective, I think it's tricky when a show of any kind does any sort of overt religious symbolism, because I think for as many people as you may please with that, there are people who you may upset, for a start. And then for all the more neutral people, the people who understand that religion's a thing but don't believe in it, the atheists of the world or the agnostics of the world, it just feels like quite ham-handed, because it's quite... The symbolism of religion is obviously... The power of a religion is its symbolism, and to put it into a TV show to make some sort of point with a visual feels like using like an archetype or a cliche to get a point across. Does that make sense? You know how sometimes in writing, well, in TV shows, in writing, you sort of look at a moment and go, they've put that moment in there because it communicates a certain thing, and it's the most standard and obvious way you can communicate that thing, and therefore that's what they've done. So... I
don't know if that's what they're doing though, personally, and I think that scenes of nativity, scenes of the three wise men has been referenced in so many shows, and that's such a, regardless of your religion or not, that's, yes, it is a religious story, but it's also a part of Christmas, a part of culture, a part of the fabric. So, for me personally, I didn't see it as that big a deal.
That's where we disagree, because I don't think it is and should be a part of, because I think for most people these days, if you look at the figures, like it's a chunk of Western society that sort of associate those images that way, but I think it's a little tricky to assume everyone does and to work like that. That's kind of why it's problematic for me, whether you're using it to evoke a certain... Because what I was getting at was you can use religious imagery to evoke certain things in general, and the nativity is the way you evoke a Christmassy vibe. But I think that the reason that trips up, and the reason I'm not a fan of when it's done, is I think it assumes a certain amount of. I think there's an arrogance to assuming most people are familiar with and get the same message out of that symbolism. I think in a world with a hugely widespread and very differing religious beliefs, I think it is a little bit sort of problematic when you're in the West, assuming that most people are going to have some version of Christianity like laid at their feet in that way, and I don't know, that never sits quite right with me personally. But that's because I guess that might be partly because I'm an atheist, therefore.
But could you, and this is one of those occasions where I'm not necessarily, I don't particularly have a hat to throw into this ring. I don't have a horse in this race. I don't have a strong opinion either way. So I think for the discussion purposes, it's interesting to look at the other side. And I think there are two arguments to that. One, if you're not religious, there's a chance that imagery is just going to go over your head, and it's possible that it's not going to mean that, and it still works. It still functions as part of the story. It still works as part of the story. Two, I make no assumptions about any of the creators of this show, but is there not an argument that if the creators of this show are religious and want to do that to tell, because that's the piece of creativity they're producing, in the way that an atheist could produce something anti-religion, they have the right to produce whatever they want, and if they're producing something that presents that side of religion, then it is no more controversial than a piece like Kevin Smith's Dogma should be. It just so happens to be the other side of that coin.
No, I agree with what you're saying there, but that's not how it's being used here. It's being used here to sort of. It's because its use here evokes Christmas, specifically the holiday. It's the nativity and it's the three wise men giving gifts, right? So the only reason you would evoke that, it's not necessarily to push a religious message of any kind, but it's you're using that iconography because it's recognizably Christmas, right? So what I'm saying is, those things aren't recognizably Christmas to everyone, and there's a weirdly, I find, and I'm not blaming the creators of this show for that at all, because it's very possible that it was just like a nice little nod to some imagery that they think would evoke that in some people. But I'm talking more generally when this sort of thing is done, rather than specifically at this example. But I find there's a weird level of arrogance to somebody. Somebody of a faith, like sort of assuming that the imagery of their faith is like definitely gonna evoke that same thoughts in other people. That's why I think religious imagery is tricky, generally speaking, in television, because again, it's very rarely used to try and push an actual religious belief. It's usually used to evoke a certain feeling or idea or sense of a holiday or something like that. And if the point of the thing is to examine that religion, then that's absolutely fine, because you're sort of looking at that specific religion, or even maybe introducing people to that religion. But in an example like this, where it's actually a story about a family sort of learning to work together to help raise this kid, because as much as Greg thinks that he's a loner and he doesn't have this support structure that Vidalia seems to have for her kids, he does. He has the gems. That story has no actual religious connotations to it, so the religious iconography is only there really to help push it as a Christmassy feeling episode, and that's where it becomes problematic. If this had been an episode about Stephen exists, what faith do we raise him in, then that'd be a very different, there'd be a very different circumstance then, and religious iconography would absolutely be used and be right to be used of any faith. That's fine, but it's because the episode specifically isn't exploring faith; it's simply using the imagery of faith to create that feeling, and that's where it becomes problematic for me. To clarify, so what you were saying
do
about,
you think it yeah, go on.
I just want to say what you were saying about sort of like, is a creator who's religious not free to express their religion in their work? Absolutely. But I do think that with religion, I think you have to be, if you're going to do that, you need to be willing to explore it properly and not just pick and choose some imagery that will help create a quick reaction. Does that make sense?
I don't think I personally got, with the exception of, like I say, that moment where I was like, oh, three wise men. I didn't particularly get, and maybe if I'd have known it aired on the 1st of December, it would be different, but I didn't particularly get this is meant to feel Christmassy vibe from it myself.
And this is kind of my point, though, because were you raised Christian?
Not, but well, I went to a C of E. I don't think because raised implies my.
That's what are your family practicing of any religion?
No, but I went to a C of E school. So
for those listening, C of E is Church of England. For those who aren't, that's which
yeah. So it's a branch of Christianity, but again, not in a. The schools didn't really. What that practically meant is that at Christmas we all had to go to a carol service. You didn't. Because I don't want. Because it's such a, without knowing the ins and outs, it can sound like one thing. Like because in England, if a school is something, that doesn't necessarily mean you are asked about your religion when you join it, and you have to be a certain religion to join it at all. It just means the school is traditionally and historically associated with a church. So the school will still accept all forms of religion, and again, not even ask that question. But that does in turn mean that you are through that at things like, especially in primary school and nursery school at Christmas, you're taken to carol services, and therefore you are introduced to that imagery. You are introduced to what those things mean. You are introduced to things like the nativity. So yes, exposure to things in that sense. And like I say, TV, I can think of loads of sitcoms that have done, shows which are played on the nativity thing.
And I legitimately have the same reaction when those shows do it as well. I'm not trying to make any statement about faith here. I am simply saying that when you borrow iconography from a religion, which by default factually not everyone is raised in or whatever, that's risky. But not risky.
What I'm saying is, I don't feel like the episode. I don't personally feel like the episode, with the exception of the moment where I was like, three wise men. I don't feel like the episode was trying to use that iconography to evoke that Christmas spirit. I didn't view it that way personally.
Yeah,
I just, and hence why I didn't notice
that
the end.
Backs it up though, because for someone who wasn't really necessarily raised that way, you went to a school that introduced you to those notions, but you're not someone who had that a part of your as a part of your sort of upbringing in that sort of more serious and militant sense. It didn't really strike you as that, but I feel like a little bit that's what they're going for. But look, here's the thing though. The counter argument, I suppose, to what I'm saying is it any different to the show referencing an anime? And I'm not equating. I'm not equating anime to religion, obviously. But the counter argument to what I'm saying, I suppose, is if they reference an obscure anime when half the people it goes over their heads, is that any different to them, referencing a religion, which is probably going to hit a lot more people than that? I guess the difference is the intent of an anime reference is just to honor a thing that they like, whereas I feel a little bit like this, it was kind of used, and I could be wrong. I am sort of assuming the intentions of the creative team here, but it felt a little bit like it was being used to evoke a Christmassy vibe, and that's where it became problematic for me. And I'm sure many of you in the comments will disagree. Please understand that I'm saying this with all due respect to whatever faith someone has. I've never been somebody who's ever given somebody shit for what they believe in that sense, but I am somebody that thinks that, like, in a world where there's so many different belief systems, I think it's using one to evoke an imagery is a little bit, maybe makes me a little. It just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel. There's just something about it that kind of bothers me. I'm not really expressing myself.
That's a fascinating thing. Like, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't even expect us to get into this conversation at all, which is because it's not even that big a part of the episode. But
and like I say, it's not something I picked up on at all. I don't feel it did do that.
There are 4 points on the page, the wiki page, that relate to it. So there are numerous references to Christianity and Christmas in this episode regarding Stephen. Like Jesus Christ, Christianity's central figure, Stephen is born in an unconventional way. Jesus was born through a virgin, while Stephen was born through an alien and human parent. It's fair. Stephen is visited by 3 crystal gems as a baby who bring him gifts the same way the 3 wise men did. Baby Stephen is taken into an unconventional place to be looked after, a van in this case, a manger in Jesus Christ's. Greg is seen draped with a blue cloth while carrying Stephen. A blue cloth is commonly associated with the Virgin Mary, Jesus Christ's birth mother, as she holds Jesus. And again, if I was to show you that image, it is quite...
Yeah. Now you've said it, like, I can see it. But watching the episode, I didn't get that. It would take someone saying that to me.
Yeah, but that's kind of, I suppose in a weird way, that's kind of my point, because I just feel like it's not as inclusive as maybe the writers intended it to be. And the reason it's problematic is not necessarily because it would cause offence to present a different religion to somebody that they might not be exposed to in the case of somebody who's maybe from a different culture. I suppose I suppose what's funny about this actually is maybe it's not as related to my religious beliefs as I thought. Maybe it's more just related to my understanding of narrative. And if you're going to try to evoke Christmas, maybe my problem is just that because there's no universal. Christmas isn't universal in that way. So trying to evoke it, like I'm just going, half the audience won't get this. Maybe that's literally what I'm saying. Maybe that's what I'm getting at. From a narrative perspective, it's just not the cleanest way to evoke a holiday.
It's just crazy because, like, for me, like, the episode is called 3 Gems and a Baby, and I watch it like, I was expecting that to be more of a spoof on 3 men and a baby. Like,
which is also in the trivia that the title is a reference to that.
Yeah, but like that's where, like I say, it's fascinating how different people read different things from it, and I'd be very fascinated. I'm not suggesting.
Read. I want to make it clear that I'm not suggesting the show is being offensive here in any way. I'm simply saying, from a practical perspective, I find it problematic when you try to do that because I know that there are other people out there who simply won't get it or go over their heads and they miss a part of what you're intending to hit on with the episode.
But I think you still get something entertaining.
Well, the rest of the episode,
I don't think the episode suffers if you.
Yeah.
So
no,
I didn't hear what you said because
I was going to agree with you, but you weren't finished, so carry on.
So I think if you don't get that, as I didn't, the episode still stands up. It's still put together. Fair. It's still structured in a way that you still get entertainment from it, and you still. I think the reason I personally don't feel that way is that I didn't read that, but my entertainment, nothing was hindered as a result of me not getting that. It was still a very fascinating story about the gems and how they handled Stephen and stuff. And I liked from that point of view this notion that in his early days, we are watching this from the point of view that we started this series. Stephen was living with the gems, and it was about the gems teaching Stephen how to be a gem, and you kind of get all we know is the gems looking after Stephen and the gems being the ones that can help and guide him. Whereas this episode and a few other flashbacks and hints we've had is when he's a baby, when he's younger than that point that we start the series, it's Greg that can offer that guidance, and it's Greg that knows what to do. Because the human baby element is more prominent. Than the gem stuff.
I agree with you. I think the episode on the whole is beautiful. I think it's worth noting that for as much as we've discussed it because it was interesting to us, I don't want anyone listening to this to get the impression that religion discussion is somehow like the crux of my review. That is a fractional thing that I thought was interesting and was worth discussing. My actual thoughts on this episode, and we got sidetracked basically because I hit on the religion thing earlier than I intended to, but it's a beautifully written episode with a really powerful message. You can take it as Chris just described, and look at it in the wider context of the show and really appreciate it on that level. But even on a just in these 11 minutes level, that story of a father who thinks he's on his own and thinks he's, out to sea a little bit, and the power of Greg looking at that image of what he thinks is a conventional family, which we know as well isn't even that, because obviously, Sour Cream isn't even really Yellowtail's son. It's his stepdad. So we know that family isn't as clean cut as it appears in that photo.
But if you don't come from a clean-cut family, Dan, do you really get that mess? I'm joking. Carry on.
You're the worst. You are the worst. I think it's really powerful to see this episode where the gems learn Greg's value in raising Steven, and Greg learns the gems value because they both have an important role to play in this person's upbringing, because he's both of those things. He's a gem and he's a person, and he's going to need his dad to help him with the human stuff, and he's going to need the gems to help him with his gem stuff. And I think the moment that they're all together and they're in the van and they've got him with the imagery aside, that's such a powerful moment from a story perspective. So I suppose in a weird way I've just undercut a point I spent 20 minutes making. Because I suppose beyond the allusions to Christmas, that image of them together as a family is one of the more powerful images of this episode, and it is incredible.
I think that's what the episode's about, and I think it does it in just a really sweet, entertaining way. I think this is certainly one of my favourite flashback episodes. I think the stuff is, the show in a way is, I love the science. Some of my favourite episodes involve just town characters or just focusing in on one or two characters, but there's also something really lovely about when it's the whole gang. And I think that's, the recent episode which had Greg's brother was a shining example of that, because that had really literally every one of the main gang apart from maybe Connie as debated on that episode. And this has, obviously it's pre-Peridot and the Cute Blue one, but it does at least still have our main gang. And also you get these subtle, and it's something else that I didn't particularly pick up on. I chose to focus on Garnet and the fusion thing, but that notion that Garnet thinks it's fusion, Amethyst thinks it's shape-shifting, and Pearl just wants it to be Rose is such a wonderful notion of how they're all dealing with this. And actually Greg in a way is wrong as well, because Greg, the gem kind of shining, Greg doesn't get that and kind of almost dismisses it, and his solution to that problem is to look at the book and compare it to a human. It might be a
fever.
Fever. So he's comparing it to a human baby thing. So Garnet fusion, Amethyst shape-shifting, Pearl Rose, Greg human baby. All of them are wrong, as stated in this episode, but all of their reactions fit and are geared to the characters we know and love. All of their reactions make sense. All of their reactions fit. And for it to nail that so subtly, for you to get such clarity on those four reactions, and for you to get a real slice of how Garnet reacted to this event, Pearl reacted to this event, which is, especially in the case of Pearl, informed by other episodes and hers and Rose's history, which we're all already aware of. But still, for it to achieve all of that in 11 minutes is, awesome. It's writing.
It is really well written, and it's got some great gags in it too. And it's got that weird moment when Pearl looks like she's going to try and remove the gem.
Oh, God, it's horrific.
Holy shit, there's something really surprising and powerful about that, because there's this weird thing of none of them know what Steven is, and if she pulls that gem... Steven's had this discussion earlier. There's an episode, actually, I can't remember which episode, but someone talks about removing Steven's gem, like pulling it from him, and he literally goes, if that happens, what happens to me? He says that in an earlier episode. So,
he dies.
I mean, yeah, well, that's the problem, presumably. God knows, though, right? For all we know, they could pull the gem out, and we could end up with a completely fine Steven, and Rose could re-emerge from that fucking gem.
Jesus, that'd be weird.
This is what I'm saying. Like a completely human Steven and Rose back. Like you don't know. That's the problem. Is you literally don't know. It could lead to a dead Steven. It could lead to a revived Rose. It could lead to neither. It could. There's a million different ways that could play, and it could lead to a completely gem Steven and a completely human Steven. Do you know what I mean? Like you just do not know how that would work.
It makes you so excited for like how it could end. Like a lot of shows like Lost, they get found or they resolve to live on the island. Trying to think of more shows. Shows where characters are in a job. Chances are they're gonna leave their job. How I Met Your Mother. He meets the mother. Friends. They'll all move on with their lives and move away from the area. The Office, those that are happy in the office will stay. Those that want to go will get new beginnings. Most shows you can predict the ending for, but Steven Universe, fucking no idea. Like, there's so many routes they could go to end this, and that's so exciting.
Yeah, and I think that this episode does a really good job of sort of really... it makes that work, because when you realize the thing this episode made me realize that really blew my mind, and I don't know why I didn't think of this. I guess you just your brain never goes that way, but there's always an assumption that I had, and maybe I'm just an idiot who didn't think it through, and you'll tell me that you were like, yeah, of course that makes sense now, why would you think that way? But I honestly always just assumed to a certain level the gems kind of knew roughly what was going on with Steven. Roughly. They didn't know exactly. Humans had, but yeah, maybe gems had mated with other species in the past, and they kind of had an idea of what Steven was. Because from the first episode, he's talking very clearly like, oh yeah, no, my mum gave up her human form. Like, gems know that's a thing they can do. Do you know what I mean? But this episode reveals that Steven really is a lot more unique than we're aware, because these gems that have lived for thousands of years have literally no idea what he is. None whatsoever. That Steven's clarity of his own sort of in those first few episodes when he's talking and he's saying like, yeah, Mum gave up her human form to make me. The clarity he's got there has come from the gems, because they've started to figure it out over him growing up, and that right at this point, at the beginning, they didn't know what the fuck was going on, which then makes you go, in a weird way, they probably still don't know what the fuck is going on now. Really, they know more, but not everything, and that makes me excited, because there was always an underlying assumption that the gems knew a lot more in general, not just about the history of the rebellion and what really went on with Rose and Pink Diamond and all that stuff. You could think about things like that, a million times over, and there's probably more to that story than we know. Either way, right? There's a lot of detail there we clearly not been given, but you never think about the other side of what they don't know. You always assume that they know what's going on with Steve, but if they don't know that, then there's a million things that could happen there as well in terms of Steven's future. So yeah, it's this episode actually manages to reestablish and make you think about something that if you'd have sat me down and gone, what do you think the gems knew about Steven's existence prior to this? I'd have probably eventually come to this conclusion that, they must have been quite confused at first. But it never occurred to me until I sat down to watch this episode. So having an episode to point that out is really, really effective. Not just in that it's a great 11-minute episode of television that does some really great character stuff and has some really good gags in it, like the dog sled gag, which I love.
It's very funny.
Because of all the ways I thought that was going to play out, that wasn't one of them.
No.
Which is just great. It also manages to do all this really interesting stuff for the wider mythology of the show, but kind of subtle things. It sort of doesn't lay out any new information, but it makes you re-examine ideas you'd assumed, things you'd thought about in the show. So yeah, I think
but without undoing your enjoyment of those previous episodes,
100%.
But just creating this new, a slightly wider playing field maybe for the future of it.
Sort of adding to it almost, almost giving you more context. Because then you think about episodes like you think about the episode The Test, and they talk about really struggling to raise Steven, and they talk about and trying to make sure he gets his confidence and like all that stuff. Like when you see episodes like this, you really, between that episode and this one, you really get the impression that gems are just lost and they don't know what they're doing
or winging it. They're just going along and facing each day as it comes.
Yeah, and that's awesome. That's really like well done. Like I think this is a great episode. I think on the whole.
Yeah, my neighbour is yelling. If people can hear that, I apologise.
Are they yelling? Are they yelling at me? Are they going, Dan, what are you talking about?
Dad, stop talking about religion.
You're distracting the episode.
What? No, it was all very linked to the episode. What? Any other triv?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some. Let's have a gander. I got so distracted. We got so distracted that I sort of lost my. A massive blizzard really.
Don't worry about that. You seem worried, Dan. You seem worried about the. It was an interesting discussion. Don't worry.
Well, that's the thing. Here's the thing. What I'm mostly worried about. I don't feel like anyone's gonna come away from that conversation thinking I'm some sort of like insane bigot or whatever. I think I made it very clear. My position is simply that I feel like it's better to be inclusive than exclusive, and I think when you pick a religion to do that sort of thing with, you're potentially excluding people. That's ultimately, I suppose, what I was getting at.
But what I worry, you did make that. You literally stated that like numerous times. So,
but my concern is that it took us. The conversation got quite interesting, and we sort of went through it in quite a lot of detail. And I feel like people might have gone, we could have made that point quicker and more succinctly than we did, and we cut into the time we could have discussed the more important elements of the episode, because I then also stated that it's really only a fraction of my thoughts on the episode. We just got sucked into it because it was a more interesting, wider conversation.
Yeah, but
that's what I'm concerned about.
Have we then got on to say everything you'd have wanted to say?
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
Well,
I don't feel I hope people don't feel robbed of a more detailed discussion or anything else. I feel like that's everything I had to say.
Yeah, but the conversation, as we always say, the conversation has to go the way it goes naturally. And
the amount of times I've had to say that politely, obviously, in the comments when people have sort of criticised the way it's played out, and I've got to sort of say that these are not pre-written conversations. Dear Lord, it would be so much easier if they were. But it's two people who are admittedly idiots. Sitting down and basically just running through their thoughts naturally, and I've always said that the reason that the people who do listen to our stuff and enjoy our stuff enjoy it is actually because it is not that structured, and it is quite just let's talk about what's interested us and hope other people find that interesting. And when we're being silly or doing stuff that we think is funny, we're not again doing that for an audience, we're doing that for ourselves. And while that will sometimes work for the listeners, it sometimes won't work for the listeners. But I think it would be I think to edit ourselves and force ourselves to be moving on from stuff or whatever, and like constantly trying to control where the conversation was going, would make the conversation feel a lot falser. You know, and I feel like the natural approach to these is one of the things that gives us an edge over some of the other content I've heard on, online. Not all, obviously. A lot of people do what we do. I'm not saying we're groundbreaking anyway. I'm simply saying that there is a lot of content out there that doesn't take that approach and is a lot more structured and organized, and there's a place for that too. And I'm sure a lot of people will enjoy that. But I think our listeners come to us specifically because we're one of the people who do the opposite thing, which is a more natural conversation. So that's the way it's played out. And unfortunately, if it made the episode imbalanced, then I guess I'll just have to put up with the people complaining later.
No, I don't think it has been imbalanced. It's also gone on like a little bit longer and stuff. So
yeah, so we've hopefully made it up for it. In terms of trivia, there actually was a huge blizzard that hit the Delmarva Peninsula about 14 years to this episode's initial airing in February 2003. Okay. And it was actually one of the biggest ever to hit the east coast of the US, which is roughly, I guess, where we know they live, because obviously they're in range of Empire City and stuff. So they're clearly on the east side of what we know as America, and I like that in the alternate history version of the world, a blizzard still hit in the same year because the weather just sort of shuffled the same way. Like, I think I don't know, there's something about that that's kind of neat.
It implies that like Mother Nature's going to be Mother Nature, I guess.
Yeah, which I think is it's cool. I love the one of the. I don't know if this is. I don't know why this is trivia, but it does mention here, and it's something I wish I'd brought up when we talked about the episode. Amethyst hints that she shapeshifted into a toilet for a very lengthy amount of time in the past. There's this really good gag where she's like, "If that is a shapeshift, Rose, what you doing? You've been a baby for ages. Why would you be a baby for so long? And then she shifted into a baby. She's like, this is pretty awesome. But she's been a baby longer than even I was a toilet seat. And that's kind of the implication being that at some point Amethyst shapeshifted into a toilet seat for her own amusement for a very long time.
Why is that a trivia?
Yeah, I don't know how that's trivia, but yeah, it is a good moment in the episode. So I'm glad I got a chance to bring it up.
The yelling is out of control. I'm really sorry if people could hear that. I don't know what is going on.
I can't hear it on my side, but I suspect
so we should be fine then.
It depends how the gain is set on the mics, I suppose, because I don't know what the sphere of volume is and how close it is to your. I think it might be.
Oh no, it's pretty. No, the gain's pretty low, so it should be fine actually.
Let's give it a couple seconds of silence. Are they yelling as we speak, Chris?
No, it's calmed. It's calmed.
Ah.
I think you're right, actually. I think the only time it picked it up on the podcast was when you also heard it, so that's quite a good measure. If you can't hear it, then
as a rule, yeah. Well, we'll see. If it's there, we've apologized. It's all good. I also like this notion that historically we find out that sort of at some point Greg hired a babysitter to watch Stephen, but that did not last very long. When the unaware of who she was, the Gems threw a jungle gym at her, believing she had somehow kidnapped Stephen.
Yeah, I kind of want to see that. And then that logically, I suppose, that would be 3 gems and a little lady. Which is the sequel to...
Very clever. This is the last episode aired in 2016. And obviously its name is a reference to the 1987 film 3 Men and a Baby, which I've just discovered came out the year I was born. So there you go.
Oh, there you go.
I'm as old as that movie.
I watched it as a kid. I can't remember it.
It's got a really... I'm pretty sure it's got a really dark... I think we watched it about 5 years ago and discovered that it's got a really dark subplot where one of them is like involved with like a gang and there's a drug deal or something and there's like a mob connection or something. I remember rewatching it and being like, this movie's darker than I remember. I thought it was just like a romp about 3 clueless guys having a baby, but it's like it's way darker than I remember.
What's the Macaulay Culkin one where the dad is like committing a robbery?
Oh God! Oh, that does sound. Oh, what is that one called?
Is it something like Getting Even with Dad or something?
Yeah, and he like foils his own dad's plans or something like.
Oh, what's it called? You able to look it up?
I'm trying to find it now, but I can't. I can't see it.
I'm sure it's Macaulay Culkin.
No, I think it is too. Or if it isn't, it was like in that era. No, I can't immediately see it on his page, but 1 second. I feel like this is very important, Chris.
I feel like we need to solve this.
Yeah, we do. I'm checking a different source now for... Because he was... The Good Son?
No.
Obviously, My Girl, Home Alone, The Good Son... Uncle Buck we know about. Only the Lonely. Wish Kid. No, that's a TV series it looks like. Getting Even with Dad. You're right, there it is, I found it.
That was Getting Even with Dad. Yeah.
Right before he did The Pagemaster, which I loved The Pagemaster.
I never saw Man, he did some films.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? Now he's in a tribute act to
I don't think he does that anymore. But I think he's doing something else. It was
something to do with pizza. What was it? It was
a tribute act to the Velvet Underground where they reworked all the songs so they were about pizza.
They were called like the Pizza Underground or something like that.
They were literally called like the Pizza Underground.
That's horrendous.
It's ridiculous.
10 points to him though for just doing whatever interests him, to be fair.
Yeah, presumably he's got money. One of my favourite adult Macaulay Culkin things is Russell Brand on one of his stand-up DVDs, one of his early stand-up DVDs, talks about wanting to try and date Mila Kunis and her being like, oh, my boyfriend Mac, and then he sees him and he's like, and then she appeared with what was clearly Macaulay Culkin. Don't go rebranding him as Mac. That is Macaulay Culkin.
That's hilarious. I thought for a minute he'd done Igby Goes Down as well, which is a favourite of mine, but it wasn't. It was Kieran Culkin, his brother.
Ah.
I was wondering why that was missing off his IMDb, but there you go. It's a great film.
There you go.
Anywho.
So there you go.
So, oh no, there's got to be more trivia. We're only halfway through the trivia.
Oh, right.
Sorry,
Oh,
buddy.
sorry.
Yeah, you
That's all right.
distracted me. We got to the
Thought
Three Men and a Baby thing, and then we were just off on a Macaulay Culkin tangent.
Macaulay Culkin tangent, even though he's not in that movie. But anyway.
No. Pearl's Gift,
my
Webby's Dictionary, is a reference to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. It's pretty neat. When Stephen yells at Greg, he answers, "I'm not that far away," exactly like he did in The Message. A little reference to a previous episode.
Oh, that's nice.
Obviously, this is Stephen here meets Ruby and Sapphire before their proper introduction to him in Jailbreak, but like the Blizzard, he had forgotten them due to infantile amnesia, which is actually the proper title for not remembering when you're a baby. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Oh, cool. I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, that's because no, obviously you don't remember what you were, your brain's like. No one remembers like being born, and it's called infantile amnesia. It's like a known thing.
I love that moment because I think it's one of those things where there are certain episodes where you probably think like, oh, it would be maybe we're going to see Ruby and Sapphire, but I like it when that's a surprise. And this isn't an episode where when it began I was like, oh, we're probably going to get a Ruby and Sapphire appearance. For us to get that was really cool.
Yeah. It's a shame they didn't get. They obviously didn't have the budget for the voice actors though. They literally appeared, said no words, then refused. Anyway,
refused. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Greg twirls his keys and sings about his carbonaire. Am I reading that word wrong? Similar to the way he did in Winter Forecast. I don't understand what I'm saying.
Don't know.
Skip over that one. I'm either mispronouncing the word or not reading it properly because I'm half asleep. Garnet saying she made her present only look like she spent much time wrapping it is similar to the way Connie tells Stephen exactly the same thing in Stephen's birthday. That's nice. And I don't know how that was just a coincidence, I suppose, because there's no way that would actually be a direct reference because Connie would not have been around. Amethyst's regeneration before the events of Gemglow makes her first appearance in the show itself. So basically, the costume Amethyst is wearing, or costume, but the regeneration of Amethyst that is from the first episode, Gemglow. There's one from earlier in Stephen's life that we see in the extended music video.
Mm-hmm.
And that's clearly the costume Amethyst, or the look Amethyst had prior to the show beginning. And it's not massively different to her design from the show, but we've never actually technically seen it in show because it's only ever been just shown to us in the extended intro. Yeah. So this is the first time we've seen it in show itself, that particular look for Amethyst.
Oh, that's cool.
Suggesting that at some point between Stephen's birth and the start of the show, she is poofed. Presumably.
Oh, that's
Although
cool.
There was a lot of debate about that because we did an episode where we talked about Jasper said that she had the diamond of she now carried the yellow diamond sort of insignia, or no, Jasper carries the yellow diamond insignia, and I said that probably suggests she's poofed since she was under pink diamond, and a lot of people were saying possible, but there's no actual verification of that, and maybe gems can will themselves to look different permanently. Which I don't know, because I feel like shapeshifting and the way that they can only hold that for so long suggests that how they naturally sort of look is how they naturally look. And
yeah,
I've always gotten the impression poofing is really the only way to majorly change your appearance permanently. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think shapeshifting's been set up as not something that can be used permanently, and changing your appearance. Unless
there's some sort of other element where, like, if you're not poofed but you do have a real personality change and you go through some sort of like, sort of big shift, maybe, or something, maybe you can wake up and find yourself looking different. That wouldn't surprise me, because I suppose when they're poofed, when they re-emerge, it's to do with where they're mentally at. We proved that with that Amethyst episode where she kept re-emerging different.
That makes sense.
I don't know. Maybe one morning you can wake up and look a bit different. I don't know. Maybe one day Peridot will wake up with a star. I'm really not sure. There's been a lot of talk about that as well, whether Peridot should have a star.
Of course, because she's now a crystal gem.
Yeah. So she's either. I have a suspicion that at some point she's going to get poofed and come back with a star. I feel like
that'd be awesome. That'd be great.
And as long as it's not played for as long as it's not done for a gag, I want her to get poofed doing something really brave and something that really helps the gems. Then she earns the star. Do you know what I mean? That'd be a great, glorious moment. I'd be up for that. So yeah. Anywho, any other references? Yeah, obviously there's oh yeah, we never really talked about this. Pearl is shown to be quite resentful towards Greg in this episode.
Yeah, I noticed that. I guess I didn't highlight it because that fits. I think it would be weirder if she wasn't resentful towards Greg.
I 100% agree. Do you think
where
that
she was in that timeline?
Do you think that this is was an appropriate amount of that?
Yeah, I think not. I don't think it was too much. I don't think it was, and I don't think it was too little either. I suppose. Yeah, it didn't.
About right.
I think you just go. I think if they made her more resentful, if they made her less resentful, you'd be like, why was Pearl okay with Greg? She wasn't okay with him at this time. And if they made her more resentful, then I think that becomes the focus of the episode, which is
so you
not
think they
meant
got
to
it
be.
just right, basically?
Yeah. So for me, at least, they hit that sweet spot quite nicely.
I think so too. She wasn't being unreasonable, but she also wasn't being like crazy angry and like not talking to him or whatever. So yeah, that's fair. This is the second time we've seen Amethyst eating a tea bag. First time being in Onion Friend. She apparently enjoys used tea bags. I found that quite funny, but I could also see somebody finding that quite gross. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I thought it was quite funny because I thought it was quite nice because it came around a line about how they all work together really nicely. So the notion that Greg got the cup of tea because he's human and needs to drink and it would warm him up, and then Amethyst eats the tea bag because she's a little bit grim. I thought that was quite nice. I thought that as well as being a gag, I thought that was being visualized to execute that point that was being made in the dialogue at the time as well.
I would agree. And then obviously Garnet giving baby Stephen a razor, saying he'd need it in the future, is obviously true because then he's seen with a beard in his adult form in so many birthdays. So she sort of, you could almost suggest that maybe she sort of saw that was a likely possibility, but or you could just see that, to be honest with you, as a gag of, well, he's going to grow up to be an adult human or a teenage human boy and need to shave
or have a particularly hairy chest. Doesn't need to be his face.
It's true. And we haven't seen. I don't think we've seen Greg's chest, but I'm predicting he's probably predicting hairy, and therefore Stephen has inherited that.
If we don't see Stephen start to get beard hairs and need to shave in Series 6, I'm going to be disappointed.
That's fair.
Or have that really pubescent boy thing of like just having a mustache, no beard, but just this shitty mustache forming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Well, it's weird. It's just because I'm debating whether to say something that'd be like a little hint, but yeah, I'll say it. They find a very Steven Universe way to handle Steven's need to shave.
Okay, that's exciting.
It's not a big part. It's not like the plot of an episode or anything, but there is an interesting sort of use of it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I'm not, like I said, I'm not giving you a big huge thing here, but it's something that comes up.
No, I'm glad that excites me that they address that.
Yeah, like I said, not in the most directive ways, but in quite a nice subtle one. So there you go, little hint for you for the future, Chris. Okay, so I think that's everything. I think we've hit on all the points. Cool. Okay. So that is everything for this week. Then we'll get out of your hair, but we'll be back on Monday for the start of the Out of This World bomb, starting with an episode titled Stephen's Dream. It's all very exciting. Big things are coming, Chris, because it's a bomb, and we certainly know from the past that bombs definitely don't have a habit of starting with something very mythology based, then meandering, and then ending on something very mythology based.
That's concerning.
No, I'm absolutely kidding here. I am purely referring to the previous bombs. No, this is a good one. I'm really excited for you to see this bomb. This bomb was something I was watching as we started recording these, and my excitement for the show came through in some of those early episodes, knowing at some point you'd be getting to this stuff.
Did you say it's called the Out of This World bomb?
I believe that's what they titled it, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I could be wrong. Oh, God, if that's not true now, I'm going to feel really bad for saying... yeah. All episodes from the Out of This World event were released on Cartoon Network's website. And oh, wow, okay, so I must have watched all these together. So it was released one a day, like a bomb, between like January the 30th and then whatever. But apparently the whole bomb was put up on the Cartoon Network app a week or two earlier.
Oh, that's cool.
No, that sort of thing.
So
they're
we're
doing
right
now,
in
to
the
be honest
throes
with
of Cartoon Network faffing about at this point.
you. Yeah. But so we'll start with Steven's Dream on Monday. 5 episodes of Steven University across the week. Monday through Friday we'll start with Steven's Dream. Obviously, we're ending where we end, and then all very exciting. So that's everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
We'll speak to you next time as we start the bomb with Steven's Dream.